Well, maybe we can start with your ideas about the meaning of the amateur arts for the community and for our life, for the quality of our lives.
Well, you know, first of all, of course, for individual people, the amateur arts are great sources of joy and just search for meaning, but also the powerful joy that the arts express, which I've seen on so many occasions. I notice that when people are participating in singing, then all their differences and all their petty quarrels fall away for a little while, and they're caught up in their own bodies in a very joyful and emotional experience. But then I think for that reason, the arts build community, and they're essential ingredients in any kind of healthy democratic society because they cross bridges of race, of class, of ethnicity, and they cross through all suspicions and barriers by the powerful communication that visual art and music and theater all make possible. So let me just give you the example that I particularly like, the Chicago Children's Choir.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Now this is a group that has in it now about 4,000 children.
4,000?
Yeah, it started from like 10, but by now it's huge, and 80% are below the poverty line. It's supported by private donations of all sorts. The city gives it just a little bit of money. And it has replaced the music programs in the schools, for one thing, so it does something good in a time of economic downturn. But then there are after-school programs, neighborhood choirs, and then finally the concert choir, which is a very high-level youth choir. And the members of that choir help and mentor the younger children in the neighborhood choir. Now, what's great about the choir is that it brings children together in ways that are non-hierarchical, across barriers of race, class, religion, and it brings them out of the isolation that unfortunately the educational system has put them in, because our schools are largely segregated by class.
Yes.
Not by race, but
more and more.
More and more, more and more. And then the other thing after that is that it gives them a sense of joy in their bodies at a time when children are entering adolescence. They're likely to be very awkward about their bodies, but side by side with other people, they're sharing their breath with someone else. And that's a very powerful kind of bonding experience, especially when it crosses these barriers. But then they sing music from all over the world. So it does another thing that sustainism, I think, stands for, is showing how interconnected we are. Just making those people think, well, just the fact that I'm from the ghetto doesn't mean I have to sing only African-American music. I can enter any culture in the world that I want to. And so here's a story about that. One day the concert choir was rehearsing, and the conductor, whom I know, came in, and she heard these 3 African-American girls singing a part of a Bach motet that they'd been rehearsing. And she said, oh, you've decided to get in some extra rehearsal time. And the girls said, no, we're just chilling.
Chilling?
Chilling, meaning it's with Bach, yeah. And how marvelous, because they didn't think, oh, my destiny is to sing African-American spirituals. No, any world culture, time or place, was their own, and they could enter it. And then they could also find other people showing respect for their culture. So it's that exchange of joy and respect that is such a powerful experience that, of course, doesn't lead just to professional musicians. Most of them will go in many different directions, but it gives them a sense of participation, community, interlocking community, and ultimately of pride in themselves, which can take them in so many different directions, to different nations of the world, but it can also just take them into a career of some sort where they're fulfilled and they feel pride. I
understood you were yourself a singer too, and you were singing in a choir.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely an amateur singer. I've always had a powerful interest in singing, and I went back only like 3 years ago and started taking lessons again in a serious way, and luckily found a wonderful teacher who's made possible for me to make great progress. So I sing in my temple choir on holidays, but then during the year where we don't have a choir, I lead the service sometimes and do all the singing. And since it's a Reformed temple, we do a lot of modern music, not just traditional cantillation, but I do the cantillation. But then with my teacher, I focus on opera, actually, and just learn arias and scenes and duets also with a partner, and then perform at her recitals.
Okay, and what is the meaning of this singing for you, this amateur art? It's an amateur art. But
well, I'm a joyful person anyway, and I love my work, and I love my friends, but I guess it's just another very powerful source of joy in my life. And it's funny, my teacher comments on it because she said, here she is, a professional musician, she has to think about, is she going to get this job? Is she going to get this job? And she says, when I see you sing, I can remember that it's all about being happy. And because I don't have to worry about what people think, I just do it. I want to be good, but in the end of the day, I do it for the love of it. And I just find singing an hour a day, it makes a difference to my life. It really changes the way I feel about everything.
And now this sustainism, and when you compare this idea of sustainism with what you are writing in your book, Not for Profits, you were writing this book about the decline of the liberal arts in education, but this book is also a kind of a plea for more interconnection and for more eye for the good things in life and for the quality of life. And how do you see those two things?
Well, I think, of course, that people do need to prepare for a job, but they're going to have pretty miserable lives if that's all they do when they're educating themselves. What I like about the liberal arts system that exists in the US and in some other countries, and increasingly in Holland, is that it enables people to do a major subject that prepares for a job, but also to enrich themselves with general liberal courses that prepare for the whole of life, and importantly, for being a good citizen who can relate well through the imagination to other citizens. And I think the arts are crucial parts of that. And I think, fortunately, that arts organizations, such as museums, opera companies, and so on, are increasingly adopting this interrelated idea of their mission, that they really want to go out into the culture, weave their web around the culture, and not just be a little place where elites go to see some paintings or something. So they want to share the experiences and reach other people. And yeah, now here's an example. The Houston Grand Opera, I just visited them to talk about their vision and what they're doing. And they, of course, know that opera is one of the most insular arts. It really hasn't connected very much with the community. It's just for elites. But they want to change that. So what they did is get together large groups from different ethnic populations that are in the city of Houston, and got them to talk about what brought them to Houston, what was the story of their family, their people. And then they work with a composer, and each group writes a very short opera about that process of coming to Houston. And then it's called Opera to Go, because it's very quick, But they then put it all together, and it's called Song of Houston. And all of a sudden, people who never thought that opera had anything to do with them, it does have to do with them. And so now Hispanic groups, African American groups, other immigrant groups, Vietnamese, Laotian groups, they're all part of the story of Houston. And they're going out into the community to do that. The guy who thought that up has just come to Chicago, and he's now the new head of the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So I've been talking to him about how he can do this in Chicago, and I'm very excited because, of course, we have the same ethnic divisions. We just, opera has never had anything to do with that. And our opera audiences are pretty
well-educated.
Well-educated.
Well.
The one minority that's well represented are gays and lesbians, but on the other hand, we need more diverse audience.
Yes. So it plays an important role in interconnecting people and to get to know new worlds and new ideas. And when we talk about the amateur arts, about the arts in general, and about liberal arts in general, it plays an important role. Now, the authors of this sustainism, they are also very enthusiastic about the internet, about the connecting role of the internet. And we talked before, and I remember from this talk that you are a bit skeptical about the blessings of the internet.
Well, I think it's a mixed blessing. There, of course, the possibility of communicating with people in different countries has great power. And I think it does have power for the arts in the way that, you know, fiction, fan fiction enables people in India to write the next chapter of some popular novel. So there are all sorts of borrowings in the arts that are very fertile and creative, where ordinary people are creating art that didn't exist before. But it also makes possible new kinds of bullying and defamation that silence people who are creative. And we know many feminist websites, including those of feminist artists, that have been shut down by deliberate harassment and what's called Google bombing, that is accessing it so many times that it just shuts down. And there are many instances of that kind of abuse. I also think that art is so much about the body, you know, and the big problem that I think human communities always have is people's ambiguous and often negative attitudes towards the human body, which is at the root, I think, of a lot of misogyny and a lot of homophobia. There are always groups in any society who are identified as hyper-bodily, hypersexual, and then despised on that account. Now, if you take the body out of the art, which the internet in a way does, yes, right? Yeah. Then you take away a lot of its therapeutic power for culture, which is to, you know, bring you in touch with a joyful experience of your own body and somebody else's body. So I think it's a big loss if we would go over to virtual art entirely. I hope that's not happening. I don't think it is. I think, you know, the thought that the film would eclipse live theater, that would prove to be false. Live theater in Chicago has never been in a healthier state, and you know, all kinds of things, not just elite, but storefront theater, very creative. So I guess I think that the internet will not be the death knell of live artistic experience either, but we better hope that it doesn't move in that direction. Okay, and yeah, this video will be presented on a conference about amateur arts, and all the people in the audience will be policymakers and managers from this field. And do you have a message for them? Because they're living in hard times, don't they? Because of the cuts from the local governments and the communities that are giving less money. Do you have an inspiring message for them? Well, I think they have an inspiring message to give to the world, which is that the arts enrich us all, and not just as individuals, but as a community. And they make for a democracy that's able to overcome issues of suspicion, misunderstanding, narrow-mindedness, and to promote, through the sheer joy and participation they offer, cultures of reconciliation and joy. So, and what do they have to say to the people who are supposed to subsidize these kind of initiatives and give money to continue to do this? And what do they have to say to convince them? That's the problem. Well, you know, I think they have lots of different audiences there. I think to the politicians, they must emphasize the contribution to the community that the arts make, because it is very powerful and very much needed. A democracy that doesn't have thriving artistic communities is in big trouble, because if people are narrow and their imaginations are kind of shriveling up, they won't be able to understand each other, and bad things will happen. But then there also, certainly in the US, they have the wealthy donors who don't like this message of community. They just think of the arts in the old-fashioned way as elite, arts, and I know that the arts organizations I talk to in America have that problem, how to communicate to them that reaching out to the larger community is worthwhile. Well, I guess the answer to that is just the success of it. When they see the involvement of people in something like Song of Houston, it's so powerful. They also commissioned a mariachi opera. There's never been a mariachi opera before, but it is wonderful. And you know, now they can even sell recordings of it and so on. So I think when people see it as the powerful success it is, and when people go to concerts of the Chicago Children's Choir, then they see right away what this is about. And so it would be a very narrow-minded donor who would say, oh, I'm going to cancel my donation because you're reaching out into the community. Usually the donors, they need their imaginations to be expanded, but they're certainly capable of that.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you very much for this conversation. And, well, I wish you a nice stay in Amsterdam.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope the conference is a huge success, as it should be, and it's very exciting. And so I'm sorry I won't be there in the body.